Good, yeah.
All right, thanks. So thanks everyone joining in this sync meeting. Yes. So let's get started. So this sync meeting is about how to dog fooding our GitLab feature flag feature. So like I already copy and paste the link here. Everything is started from this issue that we've been trying to dog fooding our feature for over, I don't know, a year, but yet we succeeded. So we are having a sync meeting to discuss about what is a viable proposal, what viable solution for this problem. And the next point is there are a couple of aspects that we need to address to achieve this dog fooding. I already summarized a couple of points in this issue. I just quickly walk through the points, and so you would get the idea that what's point need to be addressed. So basically, there are two major aspects. One is the performance. The new architecture is reliable enough, as well as the current future classes, which uses Flipper as future flag engine. And then the other aspect is the new architecture is flexible enough to allow developers to achieve their tasks. And the first point, new architecture is reliable enough. Unless Ruby client might need some improvement if you run it on GitLab.com scale. It creates Ruby thread, per-permit thread, cyclic process, and Spring, which is hammering feature flag server. So it's by design, Unleash client is not performant. Like it creates a lot of subthreads and then polling, each subthread polling flag data from feature flag server. And yeah, and we need a efficient cache mechanism that reduces performance issue. Yeah, so the point is the Unleash Ruby client doesn't have a good caching mechanism. For example, Flipper in our future class has a nice cache mechanism that L1 caches process memory and L2 caches Redis. It works really well, and even if GitLab is super big application. So we need to make sure that the new architecture has a efficient cache mechanism that at least performant enough on GitLab.com scale. And also we need to qualify that how the system, the new architecture handles errors and how it fallbacks to that if something went wrong. So basically, GitLab feature flag is using a remote feature flag server, and then the request feature flag data from the remote server. And there's of course case that if the remote server might not respond or timeout, or even like there's a possibility that the server is 500, like its service is temporarily unavailable. Then in that case, we need to figure out that what is going to happen on the new architecture. And also latency problem, yeah, etc. And the next aspect is that it's more like the new architecture is flexible enough. That means we want to allow all developers, all engineers in GitLab to use this new architecture to achieve their tasks. There are many use cases with Flipper today. and we want to cover all of them with this new architecture. And so I just covered this point. For example, GitLab experiment, growth team created this class that it basically does a bunch of extra works aside from the regular feature flag mechanism. And hopefully the new architecture covers such things as well. For example, like tracking how often feature flag was accessed. It's really important metrics for A/B testing. And some of our services, such as GitLab Pages, don't have feature flag system yet. Ideally, we want to use a new architecture for this all microservices for us. And yeah, we need to cover the most common usage. Most common usage today is using actor gate in Flipper term. So enabling a feature flag on a specific actor, for example, enabling feature on a specific project or group or user. This is the most common usage. So we definitely want to cover this. And also on-premises and local development instances might need a feature flag server. However, this should be optional as it's cumbersome to prepare it for each GitLab instance. So as I said, GitLab feature flag is like a remote server, remote feature flag server, but I don't think all of the GitLab instances want this architecture. For example, in a daily development, you don't want to build that. You don't want to build another GitLab instance for that, just debugging. So yeah. And the next point is that it's better to support variations. Today, feature class only supports Boolean flag. For example, like if the flag is enabled or if flag is disabled, just it. That's it. But looking at the launch Dockly, they also supports and also unleash. They have a beta feature that supports the other type of variables. For example, string, JSON, and integer. This is very nice feature, and hopefully we can support it in the new architecture. And growth team has a further requirement. It's they're crazy number of requirements in here. I don't think we can cover everything, but just for the reference. And
I think like pretty interesting requirement from the growth team is that they want feature flags to transition between different distinct applications, basically. Like you have about gitlab.com, you have customers gitlab.com, you have gitlab.com. Each of that are separate application, and they want to run experiments that are consistent for different users within like multiple applications. This is like the major aspect that they are trying like to solve today, and it's proving quite hard to do.
Yeah, I don't think we can achieve this in the near future. But just keep in mind that like there's such a request as well. Currently this is kind of nitpick, but engineers want to fix it ASAP. Currently, feature Flipper has a limited capability or bug that it cannot disable a flag on a specific actor, which enabling it globally. This sounds like easy to achieve, but it's not supported today. Ideally, this should be addressed in a new architecture. Well, that's it. Just a quick run through. Next up to you, Kamil. You want to talk about this point?
This one, the new architecture. So I think like this point is not really about like thinking what we use GitLab at GitLab today. It's rather thinking that like we have some abstraction and we can change anything behind that abstraction. this abstraction, I try to spend some time on like making this abstraction to present only the workflows that are supported. But now, since like we make it like quite explicit about these workflows, if we find some workflows to be hard to be supported in different model, we will just stop supporting these workflows that like we cannot like support in the different model. So from my perspective, like we are free to choose whatever we want behind the scenes, what is being executed, but there is like a few gotchas, like experimentation framework that some teams within GitHub started building on the specifics of the Flipper usage, which makes it slightly harder to migrate to anything outside of the Flipper, but it's still in the phase that like we can kind of quickly solve that aspect if we decide different endpoints to use.
I honestly think that we cannot fix experiment RB today. It's too much far. It's gone too much far. So just we want to focus on future, like especially enabling disabling on a specific actor. And then if it works in a scale, that's the thing. That's the best. That's a great first step.
Jason, you may want to mute yourself.
I'm not typing.
I don't know, it's Jason.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so Camille, you're just writing down that Unleash works in a context of user and the Flipper works on any actor. That's true by design, but also Unleash is insanely flexible, and we can just like make user in the context of project or group or any subject. Well, if Camille does want to talk about this, then we move on to the next one.
I'm just gonna comment on the like document. So let's move on to questions.
Wait, before we move on to questions, still on the performance issue. We had a lot of discussion offline regarding the limitation of the number of feature flags per project.
Yeah.
So I'd like to just note about that. Do we feel confident with the number 200? Do we want to?
Yeah, we can talk about that later. Yes. Yeah. sorry. Can we talk about that in a different time? There are many things we have to talk about. Sorry. Yeah. So let's move on.
So, Orit, like you mentioned about the limitation of 200, GitLab today has over 400 different feature flags that you can configure.
Yeah, so we can set whatever upper limit for our Dogfooding, like 400 to 500. That should be enough. I'm not really concerned at this point. Yeah. So can we move on to questions? Amy?
Sure.
Is she here?
Yeah. Yep. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah. So this is one that you already mentioned in your key points that you went over earlier about the limitation of if we use GitLab to host feature flags, then that means that there's going to be two GitLab instances, right? One that's hosting the feature flags and one that's consuming them. In our case, we can leverage ops.gitlab.net to be the home of those feature flags. However, that leaves questions around other companies or people that are using GitLab instances and how that's handled, as well as local development. Do you have to spin up two GitLab instances locally if you want to do testing? One to host your feature flags, which you may be using for the test, and then the other to do your actual test. So those are things that we have to, I don't have the answer for. We have to think about.
Yeah, we can use ops.gitlab.net for GitLab.com. Actually, I have a question. Sorry, I didn't get another question, but Camille recently created a YAML merge request, and then he made a proposal that feature flag data should be synchronized with feature flag data in repository. So there are a bunch of YAML files, and it should be synced with the remote data. But I was thinking that maybe it's a bit impossible because, like, think about this case: the ops.gitlab.net exists out of GitLab.com, right? And then, for example, engineer changed a flag on ops, or maybe added a flag on ops.gitlab.net. Basically, ops.gitlab.net doesn't have permission to write push a commit to the branch of in the GitLab.com. So we need to give a push permission, or like we need to sort out that which branch is going to be updated. Is it master or whatever?
Yeah, but it's an interesting idea of having the YAML file there to like, you could load it like figure out some way to load it as a fixture into testing, for instance. So you wouldn't have to run two separate instances. You could just like load all the feature flags, through this other mechanism of YAML and get the same behavior maybe. It would certainly grow out of, like, they could get stale pretty quickly between the two things, and maybe that's okay for local development and testing, if that's the purpose, if that's the goal. But I don't know, just things I'm thinking of there.
Mm-hmm.
So let me tell a few words about the fundamental reasons why I started even about this YAML definition. GitLab has almost 500 different feature flags. Like I'm kind of like looked at different parts of the code base and also like configuration and like the different problems that are related to these feature flags usage. We kind of like, there's a few aspects like these names are not consistent at all. Second, we don't know who created and when the given feature flag. We don't know what is like the life cycle of that feature flag because we don't really monitor their usage within the code. The next aspect, like we do not control exactly when the feature flag becomes a stale. So like you remove that from the code base, but the override is still on the system. The next aspect, like we don't have an easy way to see what feature flags are in the code base and how they are configured. And it also like created sometimes a confusion that the feature is behind the feature flag that is disabled, but we announce the feature to be like for everyone in the blog post. So I think like the feature flags are great if you actively work on removing them. But like at the scale of how many teams we have and like that we support in the single code base, it seems that like kind of not having like explicit approach for the feature flag management, it actually makes it really hard to manage there. Because like I personally, I create a feature flag and I move on to another task and I just forget about that feature flag and someone 1 year from now asks me, hey, can I remove that feature flag because it seems not useful anymore? And usually it's like at that moment, I honestly don't know. Did we fully roll out that? Is it like actually like, is it safe to remove that? And someone has to like reinvent that knowledge. And the idea behind like this YAML definition is that we could create like a split of the responsibilities. Like YAML is owned by the developer, adding, and the CI system static analyzes our test can discover we are using feature flag that I don't know about, or there is a feature flag that you did not use in this code base. Are you want to use this feature flag anymore? Maybe you want to remove the definition, which is like one part. I kind of think that like developers prefer to work with the content, written content, with the text. But on the other hand, like you have SRE or you have PM or you have anyone else who doesn't want to maybe touch this YAML. They want to go quickly see, okay, this environment has this feature flag enabled, this environment doesn't have. I have this like name that I can use, and I can quickly switch that state. And this is where like you can use UI or API or whatever else is yeah, like useful to you to do your work. But today, like we have like a system where we split like we do an implicit concept of the feature flags where like every name is like allowed and you can use that, which is like really fine. Like whatever name you choose, it's fine. But on the other hand, like we have the UI to which you have to additionally like manage and know exactly the name of what is the feature flag. And I'm kind of like trying to join this, like, sorry, I'm kind of trying to make this process explicit. Explicit for also for the reason that like we run GitLab in 5 different versions. Like consider that like on the development, all our feature flags in the code base, they are on by default for the testing. Then our on-premise customers run with some feature flags disabled because our like procedure says every feature flag is enabled by the, sorry, you should start with the feature flag that is disabled by default. So we are not always confident to enable feature flag right away. So it means that there is already like disconnect because we are testing something different that we actually shipping to our on-premise customers. And the third item, like we have our dev, our staging, we do experiments on staging and we do experiments on production. And each of these environments has like completely different state of the feature flags. So like, even though like we have multi-level testing, because of the how we manage the feature flag, like there is no consistency between like the configuration. It's quite hard to discover exactly like the simple question, like what is the difference between feature flags configured on staging and production? Another aspect, like what is the difference between feature flags that are for like in our release for the on-premise versus like what we are actually running on the gitlab.com? It's actually pretty hard to answer that question today. And I don't know if YAML like is like the best solution for that, but I think like explicitness could help us with slightly better managing that complexity connected with that.
This could be like a tool integrated with like DangerBot, essentially. When you're creating an MR, it sees that you're using a feature flag and checks if it's been documented.
Yes, so basically like today, like my POC just does, you're using the test feature.enabled with some name. I don't know what is that name is. So I'm gonna ask you, hey, please create this file that's gonna describe me what this name does mean for me. And like this YAML in the 2 days, it contains a type, it contains like the issue that should discuss removal of that feature flag, if this is like the development type of the feature flag, and should, but it's not kind of required. All of these fields are optional. It should also have like a link to the MR that initially introduced that feature flag. So like you as a developer, if you see like the name in the code, you could quickly go to the YAML. In this YAML, you would see like the group that created that and the MR that introduced that. But since we have this information in kind of like easily parsable form, we could actually have like the doc gitlab.com page with all our feature flags, how they are configured and what is the difference between like different versions of GitLab, with a kind of like a link to a place where this feature flag is like discussed, this rollout, but also like what is the current state of that feature flag and who is kind of owning that change. So maybe not a Danger, but RSpec. RSpec, it actually runs your code, so we can actually like, I'm actually like to be able to use the name that I don't know yet. So I'm gonna give you like some warning or maybe an error and ask you like to create like this definition.
Sounds cool. I like it.
It feels to me like something like a licensed feature and a feature flag are like two totally separate entities. What's the goal of trying to kind of combine them into the same YAML file usage? I'm on the front end, so I don't generally need to check for licensed features. So I'm just trying to get some more context there.
I don't understand the question about the license feature. Can you clarify a little more?
Well, so your POC has 3 different feature flag types, right? We have licensed, we have config, we have development. It's been suggested that we kind of collapse those, I think. But to me, like a licensed feature is dependent on something totally separate than feature flags, right? Like the licensed feature is dependent upon what license you have installed and what license you have enabled. So I guess my confusion is why would you lump these long-term, very specific like product money-based, I guess, features in with these short-term development feature flags that really only exist to ensure things don't break? They seem like the responsibilities of them are completely separate.
It's a very good question. I'm acknowledging what is happening today in the code base. Because every of our licensed feature, like the license by the name, let's say issues, they implicitly create a feature flag. So I don't have a strong opinion whether this approach is good or bad, but I'm kind of like acknowledging that this is how the state is today. So we use feature flags for various reasons, like development feature flags, which by definition are short-living. Mm-hmm. But we also use the feature flags for like being able to easily disable licensed feature or introduce something like a beta licensed features. There is like even kind of this method in the code base that says beta feature available, which by definition means we are in the process of introducing a new license feature that is disabled by default, but like you can still enable that using our feature flag system. So this is like the second category, and the third category that seems to also to appear is like operation type of the feature flags. Let's say we add some new flags to the side key workers, and we want this just in the case be able to disable some of these aspects, but this is like as a last resort approach. So yes, I mean by definition feature flags should be short-living, but in our code base this kind of implicitness created different velocities for the feature flags, basically. One being pretty much forever, which is licensed once. So I'm kind of like acknowledging that today, not trying to change too many things at once.
And then to continue that a little bit, I would think it's safe to say it doesn't make sense to move these licensed feature flags away from Flipper. Would that make sense? Do we want, like, does it make sense to manage licensed features from something other than the way we're doing it today? Like, we can add the YAML on top to make them more explicit, but it doesn't sound like moving them to Unleash is really in line with the goals of Unleash, because then suddenly we have to start worrying about people phoning us to get their licensed flags.
So it's even more complicated because feature flags are only to, let's say, just in the last resort, disable some license feature. Like 99% of the licensed features, they are enabled by default. 1% is probably like this beta feature available that like it's not yet like enabled by default, but 99% are enabled. But there is like, it's just like additional if condition. There is also like a big array of the mapping between EE Premium, EE Starter, EE Ultimate, and also mapping between Bronze, Silver, Gold plans to this EEP. And this EEP describes exactly that if you have the premium type of the license, you have these licensed features. But this is completely disconnected from the feature flags. The feature flags is kind of like a way for you to have an ability to disable that feature if it's like broken for any reason. It's actually like it's gonna be pretty interesting experiment to conduct later to see if we ever actually use this type of the feature flags. If we did not use that, maybe it's like we should remove them, but like it's too much for the single iteration for me.
Okay.
Sorry for interrupt. Yeah, so maybe we should have a separate meeting for YAML things. I think YAML is basically won't be a blocker for our dog fooding. So I think we can, if you have a question, so we can ask in a different time, I think. Right. So sorry. I just want to quickly just jump in proposals. So can we? Amy, do you want to finish the rest of the questions?
Sure. Let's see. The next one on here was talking about a pub/sub architecture. This is mostly specifically about having an Unleash client embedded inside of the GitLab codebase. The way that we tried to do it with the biddable client PR was having one in every worker. The Puma workers, the Sidekick workers. But that presented a problem of not being able to inform all of those different clients about changes. So we would need some sort of like pub/sub system for that, which led us down the path of maybe this isn't the actually correct solution to do anyway. So depending on which solution we think we should move forward with, this may or may not be an issue. I just wanted to call attention to it.
Yeah, cool. Okay. I think, yeah, so it depends on the approach we take. Yeah, so I don't think we can say like yes or no at this moment. Maybe talk about later at the proposal points.
And yep, the next one is if we wanted to have an unleashed client, we probably couldn't use Ruby unleashed client as is, but we could potentially modify it and contribute that code back, or do we just reinvent the wheel?
I think there's also depends on the architecture.
Yeah,
what
definitely.
System, yeah.
Yep. So again, just wanted to make sure that that was captured somewhere.
I think there's a subset of that client that makes sense to take away. Just
Potentially, yeah.
The like valuable feature flag strategy bits. Just
Yep.
So you mentioned that there were some performance issues with recalculating the flag every time. Does Flipper do anything to avoid this today? Is this like an Unleash specific concern, or is this more a concern of feature flags generally?
I think Flipper also does like similar thing. So Unleash is basically pulling in the data from the server and then evaluating in the inside, create a library, right? Flipper also fetches gates. Like in Unleash, it's called strategy, but in Flipper, it's called gates. And basically, it's kind of similar architecture, the schema, and then Flipper basically fetches the data, and then I think it's evaluated in the client. I don't think it's in the database.
So then is this kind of like a concern of feature flags as a whole then?
I think at this point is relatively like a small minor concern. So yeah.
Okay.
More like the biggest concern is how we defeat the polling problem, like how we avoid polling the hammering API. Maybe we need a proxy server, or etc. That's a point we want to mainly discuss in this discussion. Probably.
And then my last question is, can we just skip the whole polling thing? Can we somehow host the feature flags for GitLab within GitLab? That would maybe be able to clear up the issue of people needing to run 2 servers to manage their feature flags. We could, right? Like there's many ways to communicate on like a similar machine outside of just HTTP. It might help some of these performance concerns. I'm not 100% sure. But I think if you get rid of if we can just get rid of the second server, that might help the hammering of the API a bit. It does change how one would kind of manage those specific subset of feature flags, but
like Flipper is pretty good on that angle that it actually has like different adapters, and it actually allows you to model like cache and use whatever backing storage you may want. Where at this now Unleashed client, it's pretty dumb. It just constantly asks. There is like an ETAG caching. So basically, from what I remember, they send the ETAG, which is like some kind of identifier of the last received payload, and this allows like the server to say there is no change, just use the previous one. So it kind of like speeds up the process, but like it still like has this kind of amplification factor problem, which is like I mean the same problem has the Flipper if you don't use the caching layers. So
actually, I'm curious how Launch Dockley handles this. Actually, I saw that the library client libraries that actually they work similarly to the Unleash. So like they provide each language client, like Golang client, Ruby client. It's basically polling mechanism as Unleash do today. So
yeah, my understanding of Launch Darkly and Unleash's enterprise offering is that they have these deployable proxy servers that kind of help to offload a
Yeah,
lot of the pain, which is definitely something we could look into. But again,
yes. So like Unleash also provides a the proxy server. It's I think there's somewhere, and or maybe we can build a new proxy server for, I don't know, just written in a Golang or whatever performance language. This is definitely one of the idea that one of the approaches we can take.
Yeah. The Unleash API is not exactly the most challenging API to replicate, as we've already done it. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of potential code reuse. I just bring this up because we're already considering like gutting Unleash's Ruby client and wrapping it and taping a bunch of extra stuff on top of it and making it better, and wondering if we can eliminate the second server problem by not having one. Right, we already have a deployed database with all of the feature flag stuff inside it, and we already have we're already running 80 million different services on a GitLab box between the workers and Sidekick and Redis and Postgres and Gitly and so on and so forth, and we can
I think it makes sense.
Yeah, and the e-tag mechanism I know is also really dumb. Right, the clients just give you whatever you gave it, so we can kind of make that. That's another option, right? Like we can make those as strong or as weak as we want, right? Depending on how quickly it is to compute them.
Camille, do you wanna bubblerize this point? The Unleash CDN compatible?
Yeah, so like we use Cloudflare. Since this payload doesn't change very often, maybe we could just, there is still a question about authorization, but maybe if the client would send us the same payloads, because it actually fires get type of the request, it could be cached by the CDN, like pretty much, and CDN could return like there is no content change. So this could be like the very easy fix to the performance of the Unleash API.
Sorry, maybe this is dumb idea, but how about like make workhost to polling the data and then provide the cache data to Rails? Like make, workhost workhost is basically working as a proxy server for GitLab, right? Just we put we add a feature flag process in the service that it basically does a polling from the feature flag server, remote feature flag server, and then cache it inside the workhorse, or maybe writing into Redis, and then GitLab Rails basically read that data. So
it's possible. It could work. Like Rails users can have this, like Rails implements today like ETAG caching with Redis. So this is like one aspect of the optimization, and then could be like translated to Workhorse as well to not ever have this request hit Ruby. It's possible.
Do you think like this kind of process is acceptable in Workhorse?
So I guess it's not about the caching, because caching means that like you have to store data. But let's say like ETAG caching, like understanding that someone asked the same request second time and they send the same, if not modified header. This is what we use on the Rails. So basically not caching actual payload, but rather seeing that this E tag was already seen and the payload was generated. So this can be done on the workhorse because then the only dependency is on the Redis holding E tags.
Mm. So we also have the other problem that Rails need like a polling service, right? Because it has to request feature flag data from remote server, and then like it's basically a bad idea to initiate subthread under the Puma thread, each Puma worker or sidekick processes. How do we address this problem? Like the only way we can do is basically let each feature, like when feature class is called, the class is called, like enable question mark is called, it always requests to get the feature flag data from remote server. Maybe it hits it gets a cache data from workhorse or whatever things. Maybe it could be E tag, but basically, if we cannot use this like polling, creating subthreads and make it polling, if it's inefficient, then we need to fetch it every time when feature class accessed it. Am I guessing right?
So there is like a few challenges. Like today we fetch data from the DB. DB kind of guarantees that like you get this data, let's say in the 3-5 milliseconds, which is like probably like usual latency to get all of the feature flags. Can we, if we do like HTTP call, it's gonna be probably in the best scenario 30-40 milliseconds with HTTP call. So it's already like 10 times slower, but it's still not like a big problem. The question is really like the okay, like one aspect, like can you ask like each feature flag individually, or you want to ask all of them in bulk, which is like the first question. Second question is like in a distributed application, do every process ask for the feature flags individually, or you have kind of shared brain? If you have the shared brain, who evicts the cache of the shared brain if the feature flag changes, and what is the time that you expect the feature flag change to be effective to the fleet? The fourth question, what happens with the states of the feature flags if the server handing you the states of the feature flags is not available? Do you use the defaults, or do you use the latest state that you kind of received? The fifth question could be like, do you use the separate thread, or do you use like
I almost forgot to ask question. Wait, what was the first question? Well, yeah, please go on.
So let's think about the problem. You have 100 servers. On each server, you have like 16 separate processes running. How are you gonna like be efficient in giving these processes feature flags? Because consider that some feature flags can be disabled, some can be enabled, and it's different to what you have configured. You need to kind of have a process that is kind of resilient and can somehow hold the state, or maybe don't hold the state, and this is how you design the process. But like I'm kind of thinking that 100 multiplied by 16 is kind of like the herd effect. It's kind of like a big fleet of all servers like wanting feature flags. It's quite unique to GitLab.com, but I think a lot of these answers gonna help much bigger usage of the feature flags elsewhere as well. So.
For example, if you use gRPC like Gitali, is it become faster? Does it become faster than HTTP REST API?
So like HTTP is fast as well if you reuse the same connection. Like gRPC by definition is like a bidirectional type of the connection, but gRPC is like a transport. gRPC is the same as like you would say HTTP, and it's within like how you model the remote procedure calls. It really depends how your feature flag system gonna work, because you can model fetch all data in bulk or fetch each individually. But you can do the same like with HTTP, really. So I think whether you choose gRPC or HTTP or WebSockets, it doesn't really make a significant difference to the performance, because the performance is on how you manage the data that you receive and how you cache that.
Yeah, true.
Because it's gonna give you like, if you choose WebSockets, it's gonna behave exactly the same as gRPC. If you fetch data in the bulk, gRPC not gonna give you much more benefits. gRPC can and WebSockets can give you the pops up type of the notification that Amy asked to say evict the cache, which is like kind of push that information in the reverse. gRPC and WebSockets gives you like a single connection that you may share within the process instead of like many like short-living requests. But it's still not a black and white. Whether it's not still like better to have 1,000 of the long-living connections or have like one request per second for the service, which is like taking 50 milliseconds of your time. So,
like you made a proposal, like here, use a Flipper HTTP adapter for Unleash. Does it address your concern? Like, maybe I got to look at that.
I mean, like using Flipper, if you would like have like some, I don't know, there are like two approaches, like write additional adapter and that like replaces DB and allows you to use HTTP interface. Flipper already has some HTTP interface. So it kind of like goes slightly closer to AMI thoughts, is like how we run like on-premise and production, because like on-premise you would have the persistent database, which is like DB of your application, but on the on GitLab.com you would configure to use ops GitLab.net, so like GitLab feature flags basically. So like using Flipper and like changing this last layer to be switchable between DB and HTTP makes you to reuse all existing optimizations of the Flipper and all existing workflows supported by the Flipper by changing this very small portion. And this small portion is only like requesting all data, maybe in the bulk. So it just makes it slightly easier, like to start initially. And it could be like solved two ways. Like you write your own HTTP adapter that uses Unleash or maybe some other GitLab feature flags API, or we just implement, as Eugenia proposed in another issue, like let's write like Flipper API on the GitLab backend and basically make this kind of API like a first-class support. So like GitLab feature flag support Unleash clients and the Flipper clients. But like the outcome of that, it's pretty much the same from our perspective, because from our perspective, from Dogfooding, it means that like you switch between database model or you use HTTP based data source. So I don't have really a strong preference on that.
So you mean like the SARD adapter, right? Where is it? This is
It's a good place. Look below. Build Flipper instance. So basically, as you see, like the first one is active record. It means fetch data from database. It could be HTTP. It could be our own adapter. And basically, like you change like a very small portion of our Flipper. We only change.
Yeah.
You still use Flipper, but Flipper fetches data from elsewhere, which is not DB.
I mean, just quick question that, of course, GitLab Future Flag provides Unleash API, right? So are you proposing that we create Unleash adapter and the Future Flag adapters?
I have no idea.
Okay.
It's like,
I think
I don't have a strong opinion which one is better, because I don't know exactly how Flipper is extensible and whether it has like stable API for writing our own adapter. So it's like, if we would follow that route, there are like two options: writing our own adapter or writing our own first-class support for the Flipper HTTP provided adapter, because Flipper already has some HTTP adapter.
Yeah, so like, I think it makes sense to use HTTP adapter here, because we have to, we can just use existing caching layers. So we just need minimal changes.
It's like from like the Dogfooding perspective, it becomes like very small change.
Yeah, and also it works well with your YAML change. It won't be conflicted with your YAML change, right? If we go down this path.
I'm kind of like, let's not even think about my YAML definition, because it's gonna be orthogonal to whatever Shinya and team you decide how you want to proceed, because like it's building on this abstraction, but this abstraction provides you like the interface of the supported functions, and like you can model that freely.
Yeah, so I was tinkling the proposal, implementing Flipper schema API in GitLab Future Flag. It seems maybe working. I don't have full confidence, 100% confidence, but yeah, theoretically it should work. The luckily feature Flipper's schema and Unleash schema are very close. For example, like this is a Flipper schema. The top level is features, and the key state gates and gate parameters. And this is Flipper schema. Sorry, Unleash schema. It's actually same top level features, and name is key, and enable is state, and the gate is strategies. The key is name, and name. This is actually the same and as key. And the value and the parameters, we can just convert it. So technically, we can translate our Future Flag data into Flipper schema. So
yes, I think that like we have an ability to convert the Unleash strategies into Flipper gates, like one-to-one, pretty much. If you would want.
So, and luckily, our interface is very generic today. Where is it? New Future Flag. This is key, right? Let me see a live trace. In the strategy, there is research. All users is basically Boolean actor in Flipper. a % rollout is I forgot about like % rollout in Flipper, and the user IDs can be actors in Flipper. So we can just remap it at the data Flipper unleash data, unleash schema, unleash data to Flipper data.
So like from these rollout strategies, like from what I understand, we could map enabled, disabled. User IDs could map to actors on which it's
Yes,
like
exactly,
enabled.
exactly.
% rollout of logged users would map to percentage of actors, which is like the stable
That's right.
actor. And the only like missing strategy then would be like the percentage rollout of time.
Exactly.
But I'm not sure if we have to support that, even like percentage rollout of time.
It's only used one place, right, today. So maybe we can just skip it for now. So I was writing a POC. It's pretty much the same with what I said. Like here's a conversion part. Like it's basically converting strategy. If it's a strategy default, like a default strategy, then it's a Boolean, and then the choose a value, or user with ID is a actor, and gradual rollout ID, and then percentage of actors, something like that.
So probably like the only confusing part out of that is like this fundamental difference in like the behavior between Unleash and Flipper, because Unleash only cares about the user ID and session, basically, and Flipper it doesn't care about like what type of actor is that. So in our terminology of how we use Unleash is like user with ID, basically. And this is confusing because in the Flipper world, it could be like project double colon with number, which could be, it would be not really user, but rather like any type of the actor that you could model and enable for.
Yeah, so basically in our case, this has to be like project colon 1 2 3 or group 1 2 3 user colon 1 2 3, like this kind of format, and it should be formatted in this way.
Yes, I mean, this is what like Flipper accepts today. Expects.
Yeah, but technically Unleash is super flexible, so we can just adapt to this culture in Unleash.
Maybe it's really then like, if we follow that route, it's like we don't say that this is user IDs, but rather actor IDs. And in the context of the Unleash, then it's like only user is a single actor that you can have. Then like this terminology becomes a generic.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so there are a couple of things in our feature flag feature that it's Unleash specific. So maybe full generalization might be cumbersome, but at least it might work for Dogfooding. Well, I see your point that it's confusing.
It's confusing because they work on the different contexts. They care about like the different, like actor is different for these two different engines. How like actors, is there like the concept of actor in the launch directly, or is it not? How they handle that?
I don't know how to use it. Like valuations, Palliation. I think they're. Oh yeah, this one. Launch darkly also user centric. I think like user is in segment, user is not in segment. Name, first name, last name. Like these are pretty much user specific attributes. IP key, country, anonymous email. So I would say it's pretty similar to you, Alish.
Cool, but like it's not really like a big deal, because if you would like to transfer like the flipper could also like get into details of the given object and give you like some predefined attributes that like you could, for example, map to launch darkly, if you know what I mean. Because like from what I see, like launch darkly gives you like the flexible filter on many criterias, where like today with the unleash we model, I think the main usage is like whatever you put in the session or like the user name, but like it could be wildcard of the email, for example, right? By definition. So it could be achievable. Anyway, like, but I don't know, but maybe it's like it's a way, it's a something like to figure out exactly how to approach later, knowing this conceptual difference between engines.
So like we are talking about swapping active record adapter with HTTP adapter, right? And I was thinking that maybe we can just leave active record adapter as is. And then what we're going to do is basically inserting HTTP adapter between Redis and database adapter. So that it's basically what it does is if there's a feature, if there's a key in a remote server, HTTP, which fetched via HTTP adapter, then the strategy or gate is used. But if otherwise, if the key is missing in the remote server, then database is used. This is kind of great because we don't need to migrate data. You know, if like there are 200 or over 200 or 300 future flags on gitlab.com, right? And then if we switch to HTTP adapter, we have to migrate everything to the new adapter, to new storage. But if we still support database adapter, then it's much easier to roll out this new architecture.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion. The only thing, like, probably to be conscious is like the split brain problem. Is it gonna be a problem that in one system it shows you that the feature flag is enabled or disabled, but there is like some override somewhere else that makes the system to behave completely differently. So if we are fine like with this split brain, and like we are assuming that it's not gonna happen, then maybe this is like the good idea. But like my suggestion would be, if it's possible, try to avoid split brain.
that's right. Yes. maybe I'm gonna rethink about this support, this approach, like swapping the adapter, flip adapter, and without using active record adapter. So we need to migrate the data, but maybe it's better to avoid a split blame problem. The tricky point is that in this approach, if we completely swap adapter, the new adapter has to support all public methods, which means we have to support chat ops to control feature flag data in remote server, I mean. And
or maybe we just like phase out chat ops and say like go to GitLab UI or like we change chat ops to use API over ops.gitlab.net.
So completely URI specific approach. I mean, like there's the problem that still there's a way to change feature flag in Rails console, like log into Rails console, and in future you can just pretty much feature enable whatever key, and then this should the new value. This should write the new value to the remote server. So this means it's inevitable to support CRUD in this new architecture with a new adapter.
Yes, I'm wondering if it's needed. Maybe like there is only a handful of people that has access to the Rails console that can do that. Maybe we should ask them if they actually are doing that, and what would be the reasons for them to using feature.enable. Because like people like with the production access is like, I am one of the people, but also like all SRE engineers and most of the infrastructure folks. So maybe like just asking them if they use that or if they use chat ops, because like at least like majority of the developers, they use chat ops for changing
Exactly.
features.
Yeah.
And this is also our preferred way to use because it makes it visible to others what is being changed and when. This is kind of also our part of the kind of auditing process today.
Yeah. So maybe that's a good point. Like I think we create an issue per feature flag change, right, today via chat ops, I think.
No, not really. Like the issue is not being created, but since like we use Slack, it's kind of semi-visible.
Yeah. I thought like in I don't know, chat ops project or some project in ops.gitlab.com, it tracks all history of feature flag change.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I saw an issue somewhere, but maybe I'm wrong. So yeah, so in that case, we might be able to skip that, the support, create, update, delete, and just let users to update their flag in feature flag server.
Or just like fix the chat ops command to be able to update.
Yeah. So actually, that's interesting. I was also thinking about this read-only mode, kind of, we don't allow this like internal change, internal feature flag change, or like we disallow chat ops completely, but let users to update feature flag data in UI, GitLab feature flag. But this actually creates a cache invalidation problem that cache invalidation where GitLab, where Flipper's cache invalidation happens. So we inserted this active support cache store, right? But basically, these stores has their interface. Wait. Active record cache store. This is how cache is invalidated. When, for example, feature flag is added, then cache is deleted, and so that next time when the feature gets the data, then the new value is appeared. But if we completely skip this add or remove or clear these update methods, then cache won't be invalidated. So even, for example, engineers update the flag data on a remote server, but it doesn't appear in a GitLab.com because updating a remote server data doesn't invalidate the cache. So my point is that we probably want to use, we want to support add, remove, clear, or whatever, create, delete, CRD process with a new architecture.
So I'm like, it's very good question. I don't have like the good suggestion on that. Maybe like changing exactly like the interval, so on when cache is expiring, because like today, like you have 2 timeouts, which is like one timeout is the process, which is 1 minute, and second timeout is a Redis, which is 1 hour. So in the current configuration, this 1 hour would be effective because the data would be cached in the Redis. So maybe it's like the simplest approach is like to reduce this 1 hour to like to 5 minutes, and maybe this is like good enough for us.
Yeah, 5 minutes would be enough.
And maybe this is like the simplest thing to do.
Yeah.
And maybe like the other idea is like we just have we extend lib API features RB with just a method to force cache invalidate of the all feature flags. I mean from this Redis store, like single methods. For example, how like CDN systems do work. CDN, there is no like a way. There is like, sorry, the CDN system has like the special endpoint that you can call from your application or from like from another like command that's gonna force invalidation of like of the specific URI on the CDN. Cloudflare gives you like the endpoint that you can say, please invalidate this specific feature flag. Sorry, this specific URL. And maybe like you already did that.
So yeah, I was thinking the same thing. But yeah, I mean, I think this makes sense.
Sinya, I'm out of the words.
No. But this doesn't problem because when a new entry, when feature flag is updated in the remote server, we don't hook API. We don't have such feature yet. So,
but
we need.
but take account, like if it would be updated via chattops, we could call this API.
That's totally possible.
It would not work. It would not work with UI, but
yeah,
I don't know. Like it seems that like there are some ways for us like to be like make this to some extent like work, like shortening timeouts, hooking to chattops. It's just we would not cover UI, and from the UI, it would be like, I don't know, 5 minutes or whatever timeout we decide to use.
I personally prefer reducing the cache accessory expiries in.
Okay, I think like we should conclude today.
All right. Sorry. Yep. Sorry. Thank you for everyone attending this meeting. It was very valuable input. And for now, as I'm assigned to this issue, the research spike, I keep investigating this proposal mainly, the support Flipper scheme API in GitLab Future Flux, or maybe like slightly different that what Camille proposed that maybe we create a original adapter to support to use Flipper Unleash API in Flipper adapter as a Flipper adapter. I'm not sure that how it's going to be look like, but for now I'm keep investigating this approach. Well, and I'm going to report back to this issue if I discover something. Well, so thank you everyone attending this meeting. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you, Sinja.
Thanks.